Welcome to the Creative Commons RX podcast. Before diving into this episode, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that's, in millions of medicine cabinets, but in the wrong dose. It's one of the scariest things you can face in an ER.
We're talking about beta blockers and calcium channel blockers.
Exactly. Medications people take every single day to control heart rate, blood pressure. But in an overdose, they can trigger just rapid, catastrophic cardiovascular collapse.
That's absolutely right. We're talking about profound hypotension, critically slow heart rhythms. The real challenge is that they attack the heart and blood vessels at the most fundamental cellular level.
So supportive care, the usual stuff, it just isn't enough.
Often it fails completely, and that's when clinicians have to reach for these really radical, targeted rescue strategies.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. First, let's unpack exactly how these drugs, these BBs and CCBs, manage to shut down the whole system. Like, what are they doing at the molecular level?
And then we'll get into the antidotes, specifically glucagon and SECA. This is the really interesting one, high-dose insulin therapy.
Right, the GIK protocol. We need to understand how these, frankly, counterintuitive treatments work.
And for this, we're pulling from a range of clinical toxicology notes and advanced critical care curriculum.
Yeah.
We're going to connect the mechanisms to some really specific drug properties, like how fat-soluble they are, and then break down that whole metabolic rescue plan.
All right, let's start at the beginning. Part one.
Yeah.
The mechanisms. How do these drugs actually slow the heart down? Let's start with beta blockers.
Okay, so with beta blockers, you have to think of them as antagonists. They're competitive blockers.
Blocking what exactly?
They're blocking the body's natural accelerators. The catecholamines, so your epinephrine and norepinephrine.
The adrenaline.
Exactly. Those chemicals normally land on beta-adrenergic receptors and tell the heart to speed up and squeeze harder. BBs just get there first and block the parking spot, so the signal never gets through.
Okay, so the signal is blocked. What's the immediate measurable effect on the heart?
You see two big things. First is a negative chronotropic effect.
Which means heart rate.
Right. It slows down the heart's natural pacemaker, the SA node, and it slows the electrical signal moving through the AV node. The result is a dangerously slow heart rate.
And the second effect?
A negative inotropic effect. That's the force of contraction. BBs block beta-1 receptors in the heart muscle itself, so each heartbeat becomes weaker.
So it's slow and weak, a terrible combination.
It's catastrophic. Cardiac output just plummets.
And there's a metabolic piece to this too, right? It's not just mechanical.
It's a full-on energy crisis. See, the heart loves to burn free fatty acids for fuel. It's very efficient. But beta blockers, they force a shift.
To what?
They force the heart to prefer carbohydrates. And when the heart is already failing and there's no blood flow, this metabolic shift creates a massive energy deficit.
Wow.
The engine is literally running out of fuel while it's slowing down.
Wow. Okay, let's switch gears to calcium channel blockers. If BBs are blocking the signal receptor, CCBs are what? Blocking a physical gate?
That's a great way to put it. We're talking about L-type calcium channels. Calcium is the absolute trigger for any muscle contraction, heart, or blood vessels.
And CCBs just slam that gate shut.
They slam it shut. They inhibit that influx of calcium ions. No calcium, no contraction. It's that simple.
And this is where the different flavors of CCBs become really important, especially in toxicology.
Oh, absolutely critical. First, you have the non-dihydropyridines. Think verapamil, diltiazem.
Okay.
They have a huge affinity for heart tissue. They crush the heart rate and they crush contractility. For them, the hypotension comes from a failing, weak pump.
And the other group, the dihydropyridines, like amlodipine.
They are primarily vasodilators. They hit the vascular smooth muscle, relax the vessel walls.
So they make the pipes too wide.
Exactly. And that causes a massive drop in blood pressure. So you can see the problem. One group attacks the pump, the other attacks the pipes. And when you get an overdose of both,
The system is being attacked from two different directions at the same time.
and that's why those combined overdoses are so incredibly difficult to manage.
So when you look at a prescription for a beta blocker, it might say it's beta-1 selective, meaning it's only supposed to target the heart.
At therapeutic doses, yes.
But this is where it gets really interesting, right? In an overdose, that whole idea of selectivity just disappears.
It's the perfect analogy. It goes from a targeted missile to a scattershot cannon. At a normal dose, something like metoprolol sticks to the beta-1 receptors in the heart, but you flood the system.
It just spills over.
It spills over everywhere. It starts binding to beta-2 receptors in the lungs, in the peripheral blood vessels, the liver, everywhere.
And blocking those beta-2 receptors creates a whole new set of problems.
A domino effect. In the lungs, you get bronchospasm. The person can't breathe.
Yeah.
In the periphery, you get vasoconstriction, which actually makes the hypotension worse. And metabolically, it tanks their glucose regulation, which can lead to severe hypoglycemia.
This brings us to a really key concept: lipid solubility, or lipophilicity. What does that mean in simple terms?
Think of it as how much the drug likes fat versus water. A highly lipophilic drug loves fat.
And the brain is very fatty.
Incredibly fatty. So a high log D number, which is the measure we use, means the drug zips right across the blood-brain barrier.
So let's take propranolol. It has a high log D. It's very fat soluble. How does its overdose look compared to, say, atenolol, which is very water soluble?
It's a completely different picture. With propranolol, you're much more likely to see severe central nervous system toxicity. We're talking delirium, coma, seizures.
And this happens even before the blood pressure bottoms out.
Yes, that's the key. It's a direct brain effect, not just from poor blood flow. Atenolol is considered safer in that specific regard because it doesn't get into the brain as easily, though, any massive BB overdose is still life-threatening.
And some of these drugs have another trick up their sleeve: membrane stabilizing activity, or MSA.
Yeah, this is like a hidden weapon. Propranolol is the classic example again. On top of everything else, it also blocks fast sodium channels in the heart.
So it's not just slowing the signal, it's actually disrupting the electrical wiring inside the ventricles.
Exactly. On an ECG, you see that as a widened QRS interval. This makes the bradycardia and AV block so much worse, and it can lead directly to lethal ventricular arrhythmias or even just a flatline. And then you have sotalol, which is its own special danger. It blocks potassium channels, prolongs the QT interval, and sets you up for that twisting, chaotic rhythm, torsades de pointe.
Which can degrade into cardiac arrest very quickly.
Almost instantly.
All right, let's pivot to calcium channel blocker toxicity. We said that dihydropyridines, like amlodipine, are the pipe relaxers. They cause vasodilation.
Right, and the body usually tries to compensate with a reflex tachycardia. The heart speeds up.
But can you still get a slow heart rate in a massive overdose of one of those?
Oh, absolutely. In severe cases, the drug loses its selectivity for the blood vessels. If the concentration is high enough, it starts hitting the heart's L-type channels too, and you get a profound secondary bradycardia on top of the vasodilation.
But the really unique clue with CCB toxicity, the thing that sets it apart, is hyperglycemia, high blood sugar.
Yes.
Why on earth would a blood pressure medication make your blood sugar skyrocket?
This is where it all comes back to cellular metabolism. The pancreas, specifically the beta cells that release insulin, rely on those same L-type calcium channels.
So when the CCB blocks those channels,
It blocks insulin release. The body essentially becomes instantly acutely insulin deficient.
so the body is starved of the hormone it needs to get sugar into the cells.
Precisely. And it's a double whammy because the CCBs also cause insulin resistance at the cellular level. So even the little insulin that is around can't work properly. The heart muscle is screaming for fuel and it just can't get it.
And there's data suggesting that this simple number, the blood glucose, is a better predictor of how sick the patient is than anything else.
It's incredible. Retrospective studies found that the percentage increase of the peak glucose level was a better predictor of mortality in verapamil overdoses than blood pressure or heart rate.
That is a massive clinical insight.
It is. They even found a specific verapamil concentration, 5.0 micromoles, that was highly predictive of death.
So the takeaway is that a clinician should be looking at the glucose trend as a primary marker of severity. It tells you how poisoned the patient really is at a cellular level, right?
Exactly. It shifts your focus from just, chasing the blood pressure number to thinking about cellular resuscitation. You have to fix the energy deficit.
Which brings us to the antidotes. When a patient is crashing, you move past the basics pretty quickly. The first responder, the temporizing agent, is glucagon.
Glucagon is how you buy time. It's fast, and you need it while you're preparing the definitive therapy.
How does it even work, though? If the beta receptors are all blocked by the drug, how does glucagon get a signal through?
It's so clever. It basically picks the lock using a different key. Glucagon binds to its own separate receptors on the heart muscle.
So it bypasses the beta receptors completely.
Completely. This activates an enzyme, adenylate cyclase, which jacks up the levels of something called cyclic AMP, or CMP. And that rise in CAMP increases intracellular calcium, which gives you that immediate boost in heart rate and contractility. It's a total end run around the blockage.
What about actually giving it? I've heard you have to be careful.
You do. The initial dose, maybe 3 to 5 milligrams, has to be pushed very slowly over 1 or 2 minutes.
Why is that?
Because if you slam it in, it causes really profound nausea and vomiting, and that's the last thing you want. Since its effect is short-lived, you almost always have to follow it with a continuous infusion.
And that buys you time to get ready for the heavy artillery. High-dose insulin therapy, or GIK.
The definitive strategy.
Now this sounds completely backwards. Using massive doses of insulin for a heart problem. Why does that work?
It's a brilliant, multifaceted approach. First, you're just overwhelming the insulin resistance and deficiency we talked about with sheer volume. But more importantly, you're providing metabolic fuel.
Back to the energy crisis.
Exactly. High-dose insulin forces glucose into those starving heart cells. It's like a supercharger for the myocardium, giving it the energy it needs to start pumping effectively again.
So it's a metabolic rescue first, cardiac support second?
Well, and it has direct cardiac benefits, too. It acts as a systemic vasodilator, which reduces afterload and makes it easier for the heart to pump against, but without increasing the heart's oxygen demand like a traditional pressor would.
And the K in GIK is for potassium. Why is that essential?
Because that much insulin drives potassium into the cells like crazy. You can cause a life-threateningly low potassium level or hypokalemia very quickly, which can cause its own lethal arrhythmias. So you have to supplement potassium from the very beginning.
The dosing is just intense. A bolus of 1 unit per kilo, then an infusion starting at 1 or 2 units per kilo per hour, sometimes much higher. How do you manage that without causing a different crisis?
Constant monitoring. The risk of causing severe hypoglycemia is enormous. We're talking blood glucose checks every 10 minutes at the start.
Every 2 minutes.
Yes. You're constantly titrating a dextrose infusion to keep their sugar in a normal range. It is incredibly labor-intensive. It requires a dedicated nurse in the ICU just for that.
And the danger isn't over when the infusion stops, right?
Not at all. You have to taper GIK down very slowly. And because of the long half-life of the overdose drugs, the risk of hypoglycemia can last for up to 24 hours after you've stopped the insulin. The monitoring has to continue.
So if even high-dose insulin isn't working, the sources point to a few last-ditch efforts. Let's talk about methylene blue.
Methylene blue is an indirect vasopressor for that truly refractory shock. In these severe overdoses, you can get excessive nitric oxide production, which is a potent vasodilator.
And methylene blue stops that.
It blocks the enzyme, guanylate cyclase, that NO needs to work. So basically cuts the brakes on that vasodilation and helps restore some vascular tone, bringing the pressure back up.
Okay. What about phosphodiesterase inhibitors like milrinone? The theory seems to make sense.
The theory is sound, yeah. BB's lower CAMP-MP, so a PDE inhibitor, which stops CAMP from being broken down, should raise it back up. It's another attempt at a bypass.
But the data isn't great.
The human data is really lacking. And what's interesting is some animal models actually showed that combining glucagon with a PDE inhibitor was less effective than glucagon by itself. So we don't fully understand that interaction.
There's a specific use for one of them, aminophylline, though, for breathing.
Yes, that's its niche. If you have severe bronchospasm because the beta-2 receptors in the lungs are totally blocked, your normal inhalers, which are beta agonists, won't work. Aminophylline works through a different pathway to relax the airways. It's an alternative.
And finally, intravenous lipid emulsion, ILE, injecting fat into the blood.
It sounds radical, but it's reserved for those highly lipophilic drugs, like propranolol.
How does it work?
There are 2 proposed mechanisms. The first is the lipid sink theory. You're essentially creating a massive fat reservoir in the bloodstream. The fat-loving drug gets pulled out of the tissues, the heart, the brain, and into this lipid emulsion.
It literally soaks up the poison.
It soaks it up. And the second idea is that it provides a direct energy source. It gives the heart another high-energy fuel, lipids, that it can burn right away, bypassing some of those metabolic blocks.
So to wrap this all up, we've gone from the core mechanics of how BBs and CCBs shut down the heart and vessels to the specific risks of drugs like propranolol, and then through the main antidotes. Glucagon as a bridge, and high-dose insulin as the definitive metabolic rescue.
And if you really connect all the dots, I think the biggest insight here is that finding. The fact that a simple metabolic number, the degree of hyperglycemia in CCB poisoning, predicts the outcome better than our classic vital signs like blood pressure or heart rate.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea.
It really is. It
Yeah.
suggests that managing these poisonings is less about brute force, just squeezing the heart harder with pressors, and more about aggressively fixing the underlying cellular energy crisis. It tells us we need to feed the heart, not just flog it.
Feed the heart, not just flog it. That's a perfect thought to end on. It shows how everything is connected, and sometimes fixing the heart means you have to fix the metabolism first. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.